I was teaching Ayurveda at the highest level, just about. I was teaching in a program that was big, and it was with luminaries in the field. I was board certified, studying the classical texts, co-teaching with some of my best friends, and my body was completely wrecked. I couldn't poop. I was depressed, anxious, exhausted. And I was convinced, absolutely convinced, that I was doing something wrong, even though I was doing all the protocols by the book, even though I was actually following everything to the letter. And it wasn't that the framework was wrong. It was just that I felt like I was failing at it. And this is the story that I don't tell a lot. It's the betrayal I don't say out loud, even to some of my colleagues. But today I'm going to tell you exactly what I figured out and what it means for what and how you eat. My name is Veronica Wolff-Casey. I'm the host of the How to Take Care of Yourself podcast, and let's get into it. So let's rewind. Let's go back to January of 2023. It's when I moved to Maine, and this had been a dream of Kevin, my husband, and mine for several years, and we were finally making a go of it. One of the good things that came out of COVID, right, was that Kevin went remote, and I actually ended up losing a job, which ended up making it so that we could move. It was one of those things where the best thing that happened to me was that I lost a job. People say that all the time, but it was really true. And we found this little house that we love so much, and we made the move. And during the chaos of all of that, I fully expected to be, going through things, which I totally did. But then we landed. And then we were here for 6 months. And then we were here for a year. And I really thought that my depression and my anxiety would get a little more under control, because now I was living in the country. I'm originally from a small town in New Hampshire, and I figured, well, going back to that kind of situation would be a really good thing. And instead, I was still anxious and depressed, but I didn't have any reason to be. Everything was going well. We had really no concerns. We're healthy-ish, all things considered. Nobody's having any major health issues, just like these annoying things for me of anxiety, depression, and constipation. I know we don't, me, when on this podcast we talk about poop, you're just going to have to get over it. But I expected it all to go away. I really did. And it didn't. And I couldn't poop at all without help. And so for about 18 months, for a year and a half, I had to use stuff to help me poop. I had to use different forms of laxatives. I tried every herb. I did all the protocols. I even did things that I'm not going to talk about here involving ghee, that if you know, you know. I tried everything, and I had a luminary of the field helping me too, actually, more. I had like classrooms of people trying to help me to figure this out. And meanwhile, my depression and anxiety not going away, something that's plagued me since I was a little kid. I was depressed and anxious all the time, and that didn't ever change. That was always a constant companion all the time. Like, it never ended. It was always there. And I was committed to Ayurveda. It was my obsession. I studied it for 15 years under some of the biggest names out there. You name them, I studied underneath them. So it wasn't that I didn't understand what was going on. It wasn't that I didn't study. And I was teaching all of this, but I still couldn't figure it out. And, I started to get brain fog. I thought it was a medication I was taking to help me sleep. Oh yeah, because I wasn't really sleeping. Nothing I did helped Ayurvedically. And so I tried medication, at least for sleep. I wouldn't take it for anything else unless I absolutely had to. But for sleep, I was like, I need to do something. And so I tried that. And I tried doing the correct way of eating. I made sure that my food was warm. I ate at the correct times, taking digestive bitters, not only following seasonal protocols, but teaching the seasonal protocols. I was doing all the stuff and nothing was working. And so I just assumed I wasn't doing it hard enough or I wasn't doing it right enough. So I would call my teacher in tears and say, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm doing all these things. Nothing is working. I'm trying to meditate. I'm trying to be quiet. I'm doing tree meditations. I'm walking in the forest. Like I'm living in the forest, but nothing worked. Because clearly I was missing something. I mean, the framework works. I taught Ayurveda. I teach Ayurveda, but it wasn't working for me. So that the common denominator, right, is me. It must be me. And so there was this shame around it. And that's the shame I'm talking about. It's hard to talk about out loud, but I had a title, board certified Ayurvedic medical practitioner. And there weren't many. I was one of the first people to take the test. I had all these people coming to me for guidance. So I had people coming to me to teach them and help them. Well, meanwhile, I couldn't get my stuff under control. And so like standing in front of them with all their pain and their struggle while I am barely functioning myself, I felt like a hypocrite. And that's one of the hardest things for me. And so I kept reaching out to the people I trusted, reaching out to the Ayurvedic doctors who were my dearest and still are dearest friends, and said, something is wrong. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And they tell me another thing that I wasn't doing completely right according to the text, like I had missed something. Like the texts are really complicated. I'm not going to lie. And those of you who have studied Ayurveda in depth know this. It's like there are intricacies upon intricacies. And so maybe I was eating the wrong combinations of foods at the wrong time. Maybe my meal timing was off. Maybe I wasn't eating enough food. Maybe I was eating too much food. Maybe I wasn't doubling down on seasonal protocols correctly. Maybe I needed to take more herbs. Maybe I needed to take less herbs. Maybe I didn't understand my constitution. Maybe. And they weren't wrong. They were all coming from expertise. I was coming from expertise. There was a lot of care and love, and they were speaking the language that we'd all been trained in. They were doing what they believed right. I was doing what I believed right. But every time I adjusted something, every time I followed a new protocol, took a new herb, nothing changed. I mean, it would maybe it would get better for a heartbeat, and then it would go back to the way it was. So I would get these false hopes where I'd be like, this time it's going to work. And then it would not. And I know some of you have felt this way with other things, right? Some of you have been stuck, and maybe this is what you're stuck with. Maybe you're also depressed, anxious, constipated, not sleeping, whatever it is. Or maybe you're struggling with weight loss, or maybe you're struggling with some other malady that no matter what you do seems to hang on. But nothing changed for me. My gut was still, I wouldn't call it wrecked, but it was stagnant. It was like nothing wanted to move out. My mood, depressed for no reason. That's the worst. I get, my cat just died and I was sad. And I had to remind myself, you are sad for a reason, because I was depressed for so long that I had lost the concept that you can also be sad for a reason. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it really was true. My energy was still in flux. I would have days where I had tons of energy and days where I had none at all because I wasn't right. And the message I kept getting, not from teachers or anything, but it just from myself, was you must not be doing it right. You must not be committed enough. You must not understand the texts deeply enough. That's what I thought. I obviously, I always joke that like Ghostbusters. Do you remember Ghostbusters? I always joke that I am the Venkman of Ayurveda, the Peter Venkman of Ayurveda. And they joke, you never studied, because I would study my ass off and I still would be like, I have no idea what's going on. Or I would feel that way because all the protocols wouldn't work. I still had that feeling that I was failing at the one thing I was supposed to be an expert on. And there was this moment when I was talking to my friends and I just realized I can't do this. I can't commit to this level of exactingness that Ayurveda is asking me to commit to without any proof that it's working. It's not making me well. How is that possible? It's ridiculous. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to come to that conclusion, and it still makes me emotional. I'm not going to cry. I want to, but I'm not going to cry. because it's heartbreaking to realize you've studied and practiced and tried, because I thought Ayurveda was the answer for me. And it's the answer for many people, but it was not helping. I'm taking all these herbs, I'm following all these protocols, I'm studying all these texts, and I'm still constipated. I'm still depressed. I'm still anxious. I'm still feeling out of control. I'm still not sleeping as well as I could be. There's just this huge crack forming between me and what I thought I knew. But what I didn't know then is that my whole belief system was about to shatter. And that's what I've been alluding to, is just everything I thought I knew ended up being not correct for me. And that's fine. Just want to see that this is not, I'm not shaming anybody for their protocols or what they're doing. All I'm saying is that it is possible that we can have all the hope and faith in something that we have and it not to work. And it just something like, it just doesn't work. And it doesn't mean you've done it wrong. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means it's not right for you, and that's okay. There is no one size fits all. That continues to be an absolute truth. That concept of there's no one size that fits all is really what is at play here. And it's interesting because there is a lot that, for me, in my experience, Ayurveda got right for me. And I can't talk about anybody else, but I can talk about my experience. And so that was something I had to sit with, like, okay, so what do I keep? What's working? And that process is still ongoing, of figuring out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. That is still very much ongoing. And there are core truths that are absolutely still there. Water's wet, earth is heavy, fire's hot, etc. Those are universal laws. Those don't change. But I had to figure something else out. And so I talked about this a little bit in a previous podcast, but I was scrolling through YouTube, as I do, because I love YouTube. It's brilliant. Shout out to YouTube. And I was scrolling through and I found an episode with Dr. Benjamin Bickman on Diary of a CEO. And he was talking about insulin resistance. And it was like a light bulb went off in my brain, because as I was listening to him explain how chronically high insulin and glucose can cause everything: constipation, mood dysfunction, anxiety, depression, exhaustion, brain fog, weight gain, all of this. And I'm listening to him and I'm like, oh my God. How have I never heard of this before? And I was a medic in the Air Force 22 years ago, more than that now. So, it's been a while, but I did study Western medicine, not as in depth as I studied Ayurvedic medicine. And Ayurveda doesn't really look at insulin and hormones and things the same way modern medicine does, but I had never heard of high insulin being a problem. I knew sugar was an issue. Hands down. I had been an alcoholic. That's no surprise. Well, I was going to say that's no secret, but it came out as that's no surprise. But it isn't, like, honestly, if you look back at my history, it's no surprise that I was trying to self-medicate with alcohol or marijuana or whatever drug I used at the time. But I was an addict. I got sober in 2016. So it's been 10 years now. But after I got sober, I was a severe sugar addict. I was probably always a sugar addict, but especially after I quit drinking. And I hear this all the time. People who quit drinking turn to sugar because your body's looking for that sugar, alcohol. Just know that if you quit drinking and you start on sugar, like that I get it. And you're only making your path longer because you're just trading one addiction for another. But I think getting off alcohol is important. I do find, not to go off on a tangent, but I do find people who quit sugar and that switch over to a metabolically appropriate diet, they do find that all other addictions tend to fall away as well. but they have to be committed to the program. Like, you have to be committed to what we're doing. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So I knew sugar was an issue, and I tried to get off sugar several times to no avail. And so now we're in the early, probably January of 2025. And I'm listening to this podcast with Dr. Bickman, and he's talking about insulin resistance. And I'm thinking about our relationship with sugar. And I'm thinking about this past Christmas where Kevin and I were eating gigantic bags of Reese's Pieces, even though we hadn't been doing a lot with sugar. But then holidays, you got to eat sugar around the holidays. Like, why not? And so we had gotten really cracked out on sugar. And then I was trying to take it all away, and we were doing really well, finding alternatives, figuring it out. But then listening to Dr. Bickman, I'm like, oh my God, like that's me. I had heard Michaela Peterson talk about healing her autoimmune disorders with the lion diet. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh my God, what a terrible thing. That can't be good. That can't be right. Because knowing what I knew about Ayurveda, I was like, oh, I would never, you can't do that. Like, that just, you can't, something's going to give. Like, that's going to be terrible. But she had healed everything. And I was like, wow, I wonder what the mechanism is there. I never really looked into it because I was kind of, not going to lie, I was kind of scared of it. I was like, I don't know that I want to poke that bear. And I didn't, because I didn't want my beliefs and Ayurveda to get questioned. I had a really hard time thinking about these things in a way that allowed for other paradigms to be there. I'm better at it now. Well, obviously, because I had to have my whole world shook up so that I could do that. And now I'm able to see all of it. But I'm hearing what he talks about. So here's where it gets scary. Okay, so I've got Michaela Peterson in the back of my head somewhere. I've got, I'm thinking about that. And I'm listening to Dr. Bickman, and he starts describing low carb, animal based, no plants, minimal carbs, intermittent fasting. And aside from the intermittent fasting, that's not what Ayurveda recommends at all. Like, we're all like, have some khichdi, which is just like white rice and mung beans and spices and ghee. We're like, that's going to solve all your problems. But if you're insulin resistant, and I remember thinking, I'm like, I don't know that I can do that, because Ayurveda is the framework. Ayurveda is the answer to health. There's no other answer. Remember, I was like, I can't have that questioned. I was trained that Ayurveda is the medical system for the human body, right? I used to say this all the time. Ayurveda is the owner's manual for this human body you're in. I would say that to people all the time. Everything else is secondary. If Ayurveda is saying no to this approach, then it must be wrong. However, I was very much at the end of my rope, and I always knew that sugar was bad. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. But from the research I've done, which is pretty in depth at this point, I can only see detrimental effects when there's sugar in the diet. Now, you can say all you want about glucose containing foods like fruits, vegetables, etc., how the fiber slows it down, whatever. But like, just sugar by itself, that white powder that everyone is so in love with, I knew that was bad. And because I had always thought that and was trying to get us off sugar, and I was pretty freaking desperate by now and tired and done and sick of feeling depressed and going to therapists and asking them to, like, trying to work with them and coming out the other end just having cried a lot, but with no solution, like not feeling better. I had tried a bunch of medications before. You're like, just try a medication. No, I had done a bunch of medications back in the day. And I was contemplating medication again, but I really didn't want to do that because I knew that wasn't the answer either. I knew that for me specifically, and everyone's on their own journey, but for me specifically, it needed to be something else, because I knew there had to be another way. So I decided to experiment, because we're all just mad scientists in the laboratory of the body. I cut the carbs. We cut the carbs. Kevin came with me. He's a sweetheart. He was like, all right, well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. We went mostly animal-based. So we went keto for about a month. So March 7th, 2025, never forget, that was the day I was like, this is what we're doing. And so we went keto and then switched pretty quickly to Ketovore because it was clear to me that once I got rid of the sugar and the glucose spikes, when I added them back in to any extent, I had reactions. So before we started all this, if I ate too much sugar, I would get nauseous and I would break out in hives. And the same with seed oils. When I eat seed oils, cottonseed, rapeseed, canola, grapeseed, any of those, when I eat those oils, I also break out in hives and I have a reaction. And you can have whatever opinion you want to have about seed oils, and you can find whatever study you want to say whatever you want. But what I have noticed is that when I eat seed oils, I have a reaction. I can tell, even if they're not disclosed in the packaging or in like a restaurant meal that I'm eating, if I forgot to tell the waiter or waitress that I can't have it. If I have it, I'll know because the next day I'll wake up and I'll have hives somewhere in my body. But so we know this about me. Okay. So then when we started to go through this whole process, going ketovore. So what's the difference? So you can go low carb where you just take your carbs down to about 100 a day. You can go keto, which is about 50 carbs a day, where about half of your plate is vegetables and half of your plate is meat or dairy or fatty cuts of whatever you're eating. And then there's ketovore, where 75% of your plate is meat or fatty cuts of meat, and only 25% of your plate is vegetables. And then there's carnivore, which is just there are no vegetables. And so we went mostly animal-based ketovore, cut out all the seed oils, cleaned my pantry. So that's a whole fun thing. If you want a trip, go look in your pantry and look at things you think are healthy and look at the carbohydrates and then see if they have seed oils, because I guarantee you'll be very surprised, because we were healthy. I mean, Ayurvedic whole foods, very minimal processed foods in our house, like occasional snack crackers and things like that. But for the most part, you know, everything's pretty whole foods. But anything I had that was in a package, those snack crackers, other things, I looked at the label, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't eat this. I can't eat this. I can't eat this. We got rid of so much food those first few months. So we're low carb, ketovore, stopped eating most plants except for a few low carb vegetables, like lots of zucchini, leafy greens. And we were pretty good on intermittent fasting because that is one of the things Ayurveda is big on. So we were already doing that. We eat breakfast at 10, we eat lunch at 3. That's what works for us. You might have a different plan. And I don't eat anything after that. Kevin has dinner, but I just eat more at breakfast than he does. And sometimes I'll drink like a tea with some collagen in it. It's pretty simple. But here's the deal. So after we started this, so March 7th, a couple weeks after that, within a few days, things started to shift. My digestion started to change. I was having actual bowel movements at the risk of sharing too much, like real ones, after not having been able to poop without assistance of something like an herb or castor oil or anything like that. And then my mood started to lift. That was surprising. That happened so much faster than I thought it was going to. So my depression started to change. My brain fog started to lift. My anxiety started to go away. And I remember sitting with Kevin and talking to him, be like, something is happening. Like it's actually working. This experiment is actually working. And I was cautiously optimistic, but like we talked about before, I had tried things and thought things were helping and then they wouldn't. And I was also a little terrified because I knew that if I kept going down this path, there was going to be a rift. And I didn't admit it to myself at first because I was teaching. Matter of fact, March and April, the 2 months that I was kind of getting deep into this way of eating and this lifestyle, were the 2 months that I was teaching most in the programs that I was teaching in. Those were my months that I taught, ironically, digestion and food. And so I just figured, I'm like, well, I can just teach whatever it is. It'll be fine. But there was a rift, and I knew that was going to happen between me and her. It was like one of those things where like, you're like, I love this person and I have to break up with them in some ways. We could still be friends, but I have to break up. So there was this rift starting to form in my heart and my mind between me and Ayurveda, between me and the people who I loved who had dedicated their lives to Ayurveda. I mean, remember, this is like 15 years, 16 years that I had been doing this. And that scared me. But my body was telling me something that the framework couldn't hear. My body was telling me truths that I really had to listen to. And so I sat with this for a while, but I kept experimenting. I kept getting results. Digestion kept improving. Mood kept stabilizing. Energy coming back. Sleeping better. And meanwhile, I was posting on social media about how sugar is bad for you and how maybe carbs aren't the answer. And I was slowly coming to terms with something really difficult. And that was that the map I had been following my entire professional life was incomplete. Not wrong, just incomplete. It didn't account for people like me who are carbohydrate intolerant. It didn't account for people whose bodies are desperately, seriously resistant to insulin. It didn't account for people who can't digest plants the way Ayurveda says they should. And so then I had to sit with something even harder. I was taught that Ayurveda is the answer, the handbook to life that explains everything. That it's correct, comprehensive, and complete. That if something in Ayurveda isn't working for you, something is wrong. You have to figure out what the other solution is. But most likely, it's that you're doing something wrong. And that doesn't seem like it's fair to Ayurveda or my teachers, but that's usually what it was. Like, I couldn't get something to work. It was usually because I was doing something wrong. It was never Ayurveda that was wrong. And I don't know that Ayurveda is wrong at all. I just know that it wasn't fully right for me. And so then I sat with that question, but what if this system isn't the answer for everyone? Because it's turning out that it's not the answer for me. What if it's brilliant for some people, but completely wrong for others? And what if, and this is the hardest part to say out loud, what if there are a ton of people who will never heal on an Ayurvedic protocol because their bodies are wired differently? Because the food isn't the same as it used to be? Because these worlds we're living in aren't the same as they were 10,000 years ago? And I know that saying this out loud costs me. I know that there are people in my life, people I care about deeply, who have dedicated 20, 25, their lives to studying this practice. And here I am, one of their peers, saying, it didn't work for me. And I think it's not going to work for some people, no matter how perfectly they follow the protocols. It hurts to say that. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. It's what's happened. It's been over a year now for me. And I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out. I'm still healing. Like, I have to get my cortisol under control. That's a whole nother thing that needs to happen. And I had to choose. I had to choose, do I stay completely loyal to a framework that isn't healing me? Or do I follow what my body is telling me and accept that the map I believed in doesn't work for me? And I chose my body. I chose my experience that was working and that felt doable. And some people say it's extreme. We're carnivore now. We back in October, we just switched to full carnivore for various reasons. It just, I had to see if I could keep improving the things in my life by taking away the plants entirely. So we did. Occasionally we'll eat something when we're out, but it usually doesn't end well. But and some people will say that that's extreme. And I get that. And they'll say that is hard. I get that. But it doesn't feel hard to me when I know how I felt before. It doesn't feel hard to me when I have depression or anxiety that's just because something happened, like my cat died, or I'm about to go talk in front of a large group of people. So situational depression and anxiety, which was completely foreign to me, is now just, I know what it is. And I live with it like everybody else does. Something Crappy happens, you get sad about it. Something crazy happens, you get anxious about it. Like, that's okay. But that free floating depression and anxiety is gone. And I'm not constipated anymore, which was, that's my default. When shit's going sideways, shit's not coming out. Right? Like, when stuff in my life has gone crazy, then I'm not pooping. But now it's different. I am learning that my body has very specific boundaries that have become clearer throughout this whole experiment. And that's around carbohydrates. It's even staying strict carnivore, you can still get a lot of carbohydrates because of dairy. And you'll perhaps, if you've done any kind of foray into carnivore baking, you'll see that there are a lot of recipes that call for things like buttermilk powder. And so I decided a couple nights ago, I made a beef stew, just stew meat and ground beef and bone broth. It was delicious, by the way. But I made buttermilk biscuits with just buttermilk powder and eggs. And each biscuit had about 10 grams of carbs, which I didn't really think about because I try to just stay under 15, but usually I'm around 0. And I ate one of them, just one. And within about an hour and a half, my body completely freaked out. Now, if before you say, oh, maybe there was something wrong, Kevin ate the same thing and he was fine. So this is just an example of how people can be different and not every protocol works for them. So within about an hour and a half, I could feel the inflammation in my joints. Like, it became hard to kind of squeeze my hands. I could feel it in my shoulders and my neck. And I was getting this restless body feeling, like my whole body, like I had to move. I was super twitchy. My jaw was getting tight and I felt super anxious and just not good. I was wired, uncomfortable. I didn't think I was going to sleep. I didn't really sleep. I had to take the sleeping pills I don't take anymore ever. I still have some because I didn't take them all. And I actually ended up taking one that night, but it didn't even really help me. I was so inflamed. And a year ago, I would have thought that was just normal. I would have thought, well, that I would have thought, I wouldn't have even blamed anything. I would have been like, oh, I'm just having an off day. I would have just thought that was what my day was going to be like. That I would not have made the connection to the food. I would have just thought, this is just what happened. And I'm just having a bad day. And now I know that that's not normal. That's my carbohydrate intolerance. That's the inflammation that happens when I eat that. And it's my body signaling very clearly that that is not the fuel I am supposed to be running on. And that's what I'm learning from following what my body is telling me instead of what a framework is telling me. My body doesn't lie, and the map can be incomplete, but my body, what it does, how it responds, what gives it energy, what breaks it down, that's the real data. And that's the shift that happened between 18 months ago and now. That's the story that I've been wanting to tell you. And I'm telling you this now because if you are sitting where I'm sitting, if you're frustrated, depressed, anxious, exhausted, convinced that you're doing something wrong, I want you to know you're probably not doing something wrong. It's probably that the advice you're following is incomplete or perhaps incorrect for you. The framework you've been trusting might not account for how your specific body works. The map might not be guiding you to the right place. And that's not your failure. That's not a reflection of your willpower or your commitment or your intelligence. That's the system failing you. And it's not the fault of the system, and it's not the fault of you. Let's say it again. It's not the fault of the system. Although if you're following the modern American diet, it might be the fault of the system because that one's not designed to keep you healthy at all. But if you are following a health protocol, Ayurveda, whatever, it might not be right for you. And I want to tell you that there is a different way, a way that's based on what your actual body needs, not what a framework says you should be able to eat. A way that prioritizes your digestion, your energy, your mood, your sanity before it prioritizes protocol. And that's what I've been building. That's what the 1% metabolic reset method is. So here's what I want you to do. I designed a metabolic symptom tracker, and I'm going to post a link to it in the show notes. So if you're curious of charting your symptoms for 7 days to see what lines up for you, you can go download this tracker. It's just a piece of paper that you print out, and you can actually chart what your symptoms are, because then you have real information about what is happening in your body. And once you have that information, that then tells you if something's going on. And that will give you a clear data point to work with. And then if you do that for 7 days, and if you find out that you definitely need to shift things, then maybe you reach out. Or maybe you start doing a deeper dive. You don't even need to reach out to me. Would I love to work with you? Absolutely. I've got 2 groups starting in May. May 20th is the online group, and May 21st is the in-person enrichment group. I'll link to those below as well if you're just curious. But start doing a deeper dive. Don't be afraid to look outside of what you've been doing for a different answer. And I know some of you are exhausted. You're like, I've looked into everything. I've done every diet, every protocol. I'm so sick of it. I thought Ayurveda was going to be the one, or whatever system you're planning or you're following right now. You thought it was going to be the one. And if it's still not working, then just keep going. Don't just chalk it off as a failure and that nothing's ever going to work. Just keep going. Find something else. Reach out to me. I have free discovery calls. You can just talk to me for 15 minutes. Just because you want to. I'll link to that below too, right? You don't need to go alone. I want you to feel empowered to find other solutions. That's really what it is. And maybe it's my solution. Maybe it's getting rid of fiber and carbohydrates and eating mostly meat. But I want you to listen to your body and stop believing that you're the problem, because you're not. So in our next episode, we're going deep into why everything you've been told about fiber, carbs, in moderation is quietly destroying your metabolism. In the meantime, I am so glad you were here. And in case no one tells you, I love you, and I'm convinced of your capacity to continue crafting a life worth living. Take good care of yourself, friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.